So now back after half term, I didn't get as much done as I wanted to, mostly just because I didn't have the main dress itself. I had the bodice and I had the net to do the petticoat with, which obviously I was trying to avoid having huge amounts to carry backwards and forwards, but in the end the petticoat ended up being a lot more bulky than I expected, so I kind of defeated that point. I did manage to get the first layer completed, so I had the nylon stitched into the third tier, and I've pleated everything down and stitched it all together. I can't remember which layer it was. I think it was the second tier, the second row down, had quite a lot of excess in where it meted up. What I basically did was I sewed everything into one long strip and then joined each layer individually before finishing the seams, joining the tiers together, which worked quite well, but I think it might have been the last layer actually. It didn't pleat down enough into the or there wasn't enough of the layer below, and I didn't want to go back and unpick all the pleating that I'd done and have to shuffle things around, so it was just easier to just sort of sew it at the right size and then chop off the excess, but I think I was expecting that anyway because of how the layers are, like the widths of the layers, so I'm not too worried about that, and it still seems to fit. So I need to double check and measure, but I think it should be fine. I cut out the layer 2 tier 3 of the next layer up, which is the one I wanted to have finished so that I could see if the layers get shorter as they go up, or how sort of building it as I go, but I wasn't able to use my machine because I needed I have like a rolled hem foot which I was using to put the nylon in, so it has like a nice clean sort of wave to it, which looks really effective. But that particular machine was my partner was using at the time for a project that they needed, so I wasn't able to use that foot, but I was able to stitch together all the layers, which took me about the same amount of time anyway. So that is going to have to be something I do at home, because I don't think there are rolled hem foots here unless I can use that foot on one of the baninas. But yes, that'll be a at-home job. I did also manage to stitch the collar in. I had a little bit of trouble. I thought I'd sort of tacked it in place, and it was sort of all right, but when I flipped it around the right side and I trimmed down all the seam allowances and stuff, I realised that the pencil line on the back of the collar piece was visible through the fabric, and I hadn't quite hit that line in my seam when I'd stitched it, so I needed to I basically just opened up that section and pulled it through to where it needed to be and then restitched it, which worked quite well. The sort of the edges it rolls over looks really, really nice, except for there's like one little bit at the back where it's not rolled over quite as much as I would have liked it to, and I'm not quite sure if I want to go back and fiddle with that or if I want to sort of leave it as it is. I might want to do that though. Just sort of roll it back a little bit more so you can't see the lining, although the lining's white so it doesn't really matter, it's just more of a finishing thing. But I've also tacked down I sort of like sandwiched the seam allowance and tacked it down roughly where it needs to be so that the collar sort of rolls back a little bit and you can't see the lining in around most of it. But it looks quite good, it looks quite effective, I'm quite pleased with it. I'm still a little bit worried about how the stitching on like the sort of chunky embroidery thread stitching isn't quite working. I'm also a little bit concerned that I don't know which side of the collar it would be, one of the collars isn't laying as flat as it could, which is slightly annoying because it looks okay, it's not awful. It might also just be the way that the that the bodice is sitting on the dress form. It's just a little bit of a bugbear, but it all mostly seems to be okay. I could probably even press it so that it all sits as it should as well, so that it's not so awkward. But yeah, so I've tacked that down. I'm debating whether I want to top stitch over so that it's all like sandwiched in neatly and it's not going to move anywhere. The benefits of that is that the collar is definitely going to stay where it is. It's not going to, the lining isn't going to roll into it. It's not going to move at all. But the downside is that it's going to be difficult to alter if the shoulder seams need to be got at, because you have to do another layer of stitching, which isn't the end of the world, but I think I will leave it tacked for now until I've got the rest of it sewn together, because it might be once the lining is sewn into something other than at the collar point, then it will it'll be fine, but I just want to double check that. I think today the goal is to get the ruffle of the skirt sewn on to the main body of the skirt. I have a whole bunch of horsehair, so I think I've got about 30 meters of that, which I was going to put around the edge of the ruffle to give it a bit more volume, because obviously with the when I was doing not the fitting, but when I was draping on the stand over the petticoats in Purfleet the other week, it was drooping quite badly, and I want to avoid that. I've also got sort of lightweight like polyester boning. I can't remember what it's called. It's the one you can sew through. I have a lot of that, which I was going to experiment with putting around the hem, because if it's lightweight enough, it should still have the sort of like wave to it, which is maybe what I'm going for, but it won't like stick out too much. But I also have steel boning, which might go in the petticoat depending on how many layers of petticoat I manage to get done. So I have a couple of options for the structure for this thing. I think maybe structuring the skirt as well as the petticoat will help sort of help it support itself, as well as like have it on the petticoat too. So hopefully that will all work. I'm still trying to figure out the best way of attaching the petticoat to the dress. So I think I'm still going to do the sort of like slip idea, but I will need to see how chunky it all looks once I've got some more layers to work with. So yeah, I think that is the goal for today. Also some more lace arrived. I did buy a couple of meters of black lace at Fabricland when I was there, just as a sort of just for some like samples for the pockets. And yeah, I can have a play with that a little bit later, but for now I think just the skirt and getting some kind of structure in it would be ideal.